Buddy, it's Mark Crowley. I'm back with another How to Draw video. You know, people have been asking me for years, literally years, to do videos on how to draw animals. And for whatever reason, I just never have done that. And today we are going to break the silence and finally do a video on how to draw cats to begin with. And so let's just jump right into it. I'm going to put down some basic guidelines here, and I'm going to begin by drawing the body of the cat. The cat is going to be, this is kind of like floorboards, like we're sort of looking down a little bit on this cat that is relaxing on the floor. So I'm going to begin by making a curved line up here at the top of the page. This is the back, the cat's back. And the lower part, which I guess would be the belly, sort of follows with that same gentle curve, at least, you know, in this the pose that I'm going to be showing you how to draw today. So you can kind of begin with these two basic lines that sort of parallel one another. And then the next job is to begin to figure out where the head is going to go. Why don't I just, as a way of helping you place the head, I'm going to continue a line here, even though this line gets erased eventually, and come over here to sort of finish off the front of the body. I know it's a little hard to see what it is that I'm drawing here at the moment, but I think that's all going to change when I draw the shape of the head. And then you'll start to get a sense of where I'm going with this. So the head, to begin with, really all you need to do is draw a circular shape, and surprisingly the head of the cat is pretty close to this circle all the way through. It's got, you know, it sort of changes a little bit towards the snout, I suppose, but as I studied photographs of cats, and that's what I used, you know, as reference, I looked at different photographs of cats here. I was surprised at the degree to which the cat's head is almost a perfect circle. And I am going to be zooming in later on to show greater detail. And I'll hold off on doing the ears until we get a little more of the basic shape of the body in. Let's go ahead and move back here and start drawing this rear leg. Drawing the legs of quite a number of animals, quadrupeds, I guess it would be. The rear leg has this kind of unusual shape. It's unusual to us as humans. I'm sure it's not unusual to them. They think it looks awesome. But it does have this unusual sort of zigzagging, slightly crooked quality to it. Again, it's so judgmental. Crooked? Those legs aren't crooked. Why are you... It's like you're criticizing the animal kingdom for the shape of their legs. But it does sort of look to us like it sort of zigzags a little here. And in terms of the sort of guidelines as to what you should be looking for as you draw this leg, I would just point out that first of all, the thigh, I guess you would call it up here, very wide from one side to the other. And I've put in an indication of a line here that's actually not on the animal, but I think it helps you sort of see this shape. But notice how this is the widest part. Then you come down to this, if it's a zigzag, it's sort of zigging here before it starts to zag down here. Let's say this is the zig part, and it gets a little narrower, and finally you get down to the zag. So articulate of me. And the zag is actually quite narrow. So you can see there's a rather drastic difference there. And then the angle here, quite sharp here, but a little more subtle, the angle of that line right there. Anyway, I should keep moving because there's no way I can draw every single detail or you know, walk you through every single detail here. But in this pose, the other leg is back here, kind of behind the first one. You don't have to draw very much of that leg, happily. And while we're over here, why don't we do the tail? One thing that was sort of interesting to me as I was studying is, you know, I'm the kind of person who, if I ever tried to draw a cat, I was just sort of drawing it from memory, winging it, not really paying too much attention to the realities of what a cat looks like. And I found it interesting to see, first of all, the length of the tail, maybe not quite as long as I imagine it to be. A cat's tail. I don't know how you imagine a cat's tail to be, but I think I was thinking of something maybe more like a monkey or something. I had this idea that cats' tails were really quite long. They're not that long. And then sometimes, of course, it's going to be curving in different ways, but the photo that I looked at, the cat's the cat's tail was sort of curving like this, and then when it came to the tip, there was like a quick little curve at the end. Again, it's, you know, depending on what pose you look at, you're going to see all different, you know, shapes or for the tail. But anyway, I just thought it was interesting the way it went like that and sort of hooked off at the back. Anyway, I'm going to sort of firm up this back, the spine, I suppose we would say, of the cat. Now it's time to come over here, and where I had drawn this, we're going to draw the foreleg, the front paw. And remember how I had these lines kind of curve over here? This is a great place to have the other leg come out, again, in this particular pose. And you get that same sort of sense of this, it being thicker up here and noticeably narrower from side to side and quite long. I was surprised to see as I studied photographs. And then the final leg in this particular pose is way over here, largely concealed by the body of the cat as it's sort of looking up at us. And this is getting us kind of towards the details. I think I probably want to zoom in now on the head so that I can walk you through the different lines. But notice how long the body is. This was sort of surprising to me, and I maybe have exaggerated it too much here, but the body of a cat in this particular pose is really quite long. So let's go ahead and shift the focus onto the head. We'll get into the details. All right, so again, I'm going to try to do a line-by-line thing here on the face, but to keep the video shorter, I think we're going to have to time-lapse through a lot of the shading and details later on. But I certainly want to show you how to draw the ears, the eyes, and so forth. So here's the ears in this particular pose. As you would imagine, they are sort of triangle shapes, although I notice sometimes there's a little bit of an extra curve here at the bottom edge. This is when the cat's ears are sort of perked up and listening. What is that sound? What is that? My next meal? And the ears are sort of up and alert. And what you see is you can sometimes see a little bit of the back of the ear on just this upper edge here. And then the rest of it is this sort of inner ear that's facing toward us. You'll want to note the size of the ears. Sometimes we can get a little carried away with making them too big. And I'm sure different breeds of cats have different sizes of ears and so forth. I'm going to move on now to drawing the eyes. And they are more or less right in the middle of that circle. And interestingly, there is approximately one eye's width between the two of them, which is kind of one of the guidelines that we use when we draw human faces. You want the eyes to be one eye's worth of distance away from one another. And so I thought, hey, interesting, the kingdom, the felines are also sort of following that rule. So here it's time to kind of get the bridge of the nose. It's going to come down here between the two, and sometimes you can actually see an indication of this line cutting in front of the lower line as it comes down to the nose. And I had never really studied a cat's nose too much until I started preparing for this video, and found that it's not a neat little triangle. It sort of actually splits into three different areas, you know, to the left, to the right, and then coming down in the middle. Again, not so sure if different cats might have different shaped noses, but fairly small. And I found that it's a challenge sometimes to get the mouth right. You don't want to delineate this too much. Now, I told you that it's mainly a circle, and this is maybe the one area where you can have it come down a little bit for the lower jaw. That's why you erased a little bit there. This is the one part where it isn't such, you know, it sort of breaks away from that idea of the circle. And then another interesting thing that I noticed was in the eyes. Now, we have this classic idea of the cat's eyes, and I'm going to go ahead and do this here, of them being quite narrow from top to bottom, right, like that. But that is there's a sort of a dilation thing going on there, that when a cat wants to open its eyes wide, then the pupil becomes quite circular. But I thought in this case we would want to do the classic cat eye, which is to say these sort of vertical, quite narrow shapes. And then, you know, this sort of gives you the placement of the eyes in general. Let's see what have we done here. We have already used up to 10 minutes or so, it seems, of video time to create this. I think I'm going to have to move things along. The whiskers coming off here, this is a bit of a cheat, because if you look at photos, it seems to me, of almost all varieties of cats, the whiskers are actually white. The hairs are actually white. And so when I'm using a pencil to draw these whiskers, I'm kind of cheating a little. If you were doing a hyper photorealistic illustration where you were doing careful shading of everything, you probably would want to do these whiskers in white using, I don't know, white paint or a white pencil or something. Could be quite tricky to do that. But I think for my purposes, I'm going to let myself get away with the slight inaccuracy of what look like sort of gray-colored whiskers. One thing I also noticed, and this is getting into extra details, there seem to be sort of sometimes they're not whiskers, maybe eyebrows or something. You'll see extra hairs that come off the top of the head there. It looks a little weird the way I've done it just now, because generally those hairs are a little more concealed, I think, by the patterns of shading. And maybe I'll make that the last thing that I talk about, where the different stripes, and we are dealing with one of these classic striped cats here. The basic pattern. See how it's like bags almost under the eyes. Again, different cats are probably going to have different patterns, but I noticed in a number of photographs that you would, if you're looking for a good tried and true method of where to put the stripes, underneath the eyes, following along the lower eyelid is not a bad idea. I want to pull back to give you some tips on the stripe pattern along the body. And that might have to be the last thing I do before I kick it into time-lapse, as I so often do to finish off the details of the drawing. But let's do one last thing in real time. All right, and I just want to begin by saying, if you're looking at this face and it looks weird to you, I would say I agree. It does look it looks weird to me as well. It's going to take some refining at the end of the video, because it's looking very caffeinated. Like somebody slipped some Monster drink into the milk of this cat, and I think I need to keep working on the mouth as well. But we're going to get to that later on. I want to quickly talk about the pattern that you see of the fur and where the stripes go. And I'm just going to dash in here. They follow along the body just as you would expect with like a tiger or something in a vertical pattern. I'm not going to do every single line because I am trying to sort of move this video along, but you get the idea. That's the way it's going to go there. Now, when you come over to the haunch, hope I've got that phrase right, these stripes start to follow along in this kind of a pattern, and if you give it a little bit of a curve, that helps to suggest the form, give that leg some sort of solidity. You know, rather than if you went straight across there, it would kind of flatten it out. I'm feeling like I actually had made this area here a little too thick. So I'm going to try to refine that a little bit. And then, yeah, so all these stripes will be getting kind of smaller and narrower as they come down. And as you reach the final place where the paws are, I would say that the stripes tend to vanish as they get closer to the paw, and just sort of it becomes white. Or black, or whatever kind of a cat you've got there. Of course, yeah, if you're drawing a black cat, boy, you don't have to bother with all these stripes. Maybe that's the best thing to do. But here's if you follow along with these these lines that come across the back, when you get over here at the neck, you may find some stripes that follow along in a curving pattern like this, right around the base of the neck. Also, the stripes sort of following in this type of a direction across the upper arm. It's not an arm, is it? They're all legs. But I think you know what I'm trying to say. Come on, people. I haven't broken out the Brooklyn accent for a while. Hey, we got a lot of cats in Brooklyn. They're all over the streets. In any case, I think we're almost done with the basic... I haven't got to the tail. Let's come over here and do the tail. That'll be the last thing I do. Again, sort of a tiger-like pattern. And I think different cats are going to, of course, have more widely spaced stripes and so forth. I think you can allow yourself the freedom to kind of play around with this and make as many or as few stripes as you care to. And I think that is basically it for this video. You're going to see me do a lot more in time-lapse. Sadly, I do want to try to keep this video to a reasonable length. But let me know what you thought of this idea of doing videos about animals. Like I said, people have been requesting it for ages, and I thought it was finally time for me to give those people a video that they were waiting for with this one on cats. So let's go ahead and kick it into time-lapse. I'm going to finish it off with my trusty black Prismacolor, if I can find it around here somewhere, and we'll be back with some final words. Alright, well, my apologies for the excessive amount of time-lapse in this one. I think if I ever do another one of these animal how to draw videos, I'm going to have to break it into 2 parts. It's more time-consuming than I thought it was going to be.